Well, I sat through another episode of House of the Dragon. This episode called The Rogue Prince. Gee, I wonder what that's about. Well, it's about Doctor Who. Yeah. Poor Matt Smith. I wonder by now he thinks, boy, I probably left that role a little too early. You sure did, Matt. Of course, so did David Tennant, I think. And Peter Capaldi. But of course, Peter Capaldi didn't have a choice. Probably the best actor to play the role, certainly in the new series, and they just kicked him out the door. Anyway, Matt Smith, of course, is one of the bright spots of this series. And we're 2 episodes in, and for the most part, it's okay. It's not bad. It's not as spectacular or as intriguing as Game of Thrones was as it opened, and seemed to be getting better and better as it went, and then it was going somewhere and all this stuff, only to find out it really wasn't. Well, again, the plot points could have worked, but you couldn't do that in 5 seconds. I'm exaggerating, of course, but that's the ultimate bigger problem there. And how the Night King dies and all that, and it's like, oh, you got to be kidding me, after all that buildup about this, damn near world-ending threat that they were facing, that this show refers to as this terrible time that's coming, this awful winter and all that stuff. And this is this prophecy that the Targaryen rulers are, burdened with and all that. But as for this particular series, which seems to center around this castle intrigue soap opera type deal, with the families at each other and the lines being drawn as they're fighting against each other. Meanwhile, there's a menacing threat. They're about to all be infested with crabs. Well, apparently this is the Submariners are going to attack them. And just when they need a strong navy, there's problems there because the head of the ships wants to assure his power, so to marry his line to the king. But the problem is his daughter's only 12. He's like, hey, whatever, in a couple of years she'll be ready. And the king is like reluctant. Thank God. The king, he's a rather for the most part kind of a not so much weak, I would say, but not quite up to the job. And he basically appears to be a nice guy. He's somewhat reluctant to all the creepiness that is his world, but ultimately he has to pick a wife because they're pushing him to do it, and he doesn't really want to. His wife was his wife, and she's dead now, and he's guilt-ridden about that because he was pushing her to have a male heir and all this sort of thing. Meanwhile, he's already named his daughter as the heir, but they're still manipulating and pushing, and they're going to shove her to the side, and everybody's vying, marry my daughter, marry my daughter. So his creepy hand has already set things in motion by sending his daughter to go be his little companion. And it seems all they ever did was visit and whatnot, but over time, the king has developed an affection for her, and if he's got to choose a wife, well, then he goes with her. But of course, she's also the obvious lesbian fancy of his daughter. So he didn't tell her that's what she's accepting of the idea that he has to remarry. And she's like, yeah, that's our duties and all that stuff. I understand. And he's got to secure the family should anything happen to her, because in this episode she puts her life at risk for the sake of her uncle. Now, the Rogue Prince, of course, is the Matt Smith character, who's more or less been exiled to the old family castle and whatnot. But now he's causing troubles. He steals one of the dragon eggs. He marries his mistress, even though he's already married, but it was a woman he was forced to marry, and this is a woman he actually apparently likes. And we almost have a showdown between his guys and the Hands guards, and then But now Princess shows up on her dragon, even though Uncle has a dragon. You think, oh no, we're going to have dueling dragons. But no, he's very fond of his niece, and he backs down. So what to do? Well, of course, as the soap opera unfolds, the castle intrigue, since the, what do they call him, the shipmaster, has been spurned here because he's the king has chosen his hand's daughter, not his daughter, which at least the hand's daughter is, I think she's supposed to be 15 at this point. Still, I know, creepy, but well, it's 3 years better than 12. So anyway, he's all pissed, feeling he's been left out in the cold. So now he's forming an alliance with the Rogue Prince, Doctor Who. So yeah, and you know, it fits and works depending on where they are. Even though the prince actually did say he loved his brother, he wanted to be his main advisor, you know, but he's sort of locked out by the manipulating bastards who don't really care about him. And when he said, I could have protected you, that seems to be genuine, but his brother doesn't believe him, and he sends him away, and so now all bets are off as far as that goes. And but then, you know, once again, if he seeks the throne, then he's got his niece to contend with, and you know, he doesn't want to do that. But, oh well, the things you got to do for love of power, you know. So it looks good. The performances are fine. But of course, we all know where this goes, and that's the huge problem with House of the Dragon. And you know, and of course, it says it in even the opening was a callback to Game of Thrones, and this is just another aspect of Game of Thrones. And but like, I compared it to Star Wars, and that all things lead to the Star Wars sequel trilogy, which is crap. But the Game of Thrones ending, like I said, the plot points, had they been handled better, and they would have needed more seasons. It probably could have gone as long as 10 seasons to flesh that out and give it more credibility for what becomes of Daenerys and all of that. Especially that's the biggest problem. And the Night King needed to be seen as a more formidable menace at his end, you know, and then that's akin to him stumbling and hitting his head on the toilet, you know. But beyond that, it probably could have worked out all right. Whereas with Star Wars, there were no good plot points with what they did with their sequel trilogy. So I'm guessing that holds more sway for the success of House of the Dragon, because apparently it's doing well. I don't know who to believe with these numbers anymore, but we'll go with it that there's some amount of success for it, at least for the purposes of HBO Max. So, so far 2 episodes in, and I can't say it's a bad show. It isn't. It's just attached to a failed show that was once great, and that makes it even worse when it fails. Shows that were just kind of so-so and then went to crap, or shows like the Star Trek shows that were terrible. It doesn't matter, except it's the brand of Star Trek that they ruined. That's what matters. But here, it's so far so good, but it can't overcome the stain of the original series ending, and that remains the bigger problem for it, rather than the show in and of itself.